For decades, the Pentagon has quietly influenced every major fighter jet decision made by Canada. From the Cold War to modern times, Canada's defense strategy has always been tied closely to Washington's wishes. But now, something unprecedented is happening. Canada is breaking free from America's military shadow. And the Pentagon is absolutely furious. It all began when Canada announced that it was seriously considering European fighter jets, especially Sweden's Saab Gripen E, as a replacement for its aging fleet of CF-18 Hornets. This single decision sent shockwaves through Washington because it challenged decades of US dominance over Canada's defense procurement. To understand why the Pentagon is so angry, we need to go back to how this relationship began. In the 1950s, during the height of the Cold War, Canada was one of America's closest allies in the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD. The idea was simple. Canada would rely on American defense technology, and in return, both countries would share intelligence and military cooperation. It worked well for a time. But it also created a deep dependency, one that gave the Pentagon enormous leverage over Canadian defense decisions. Over the years, American companies like Lockheed Martin and Boeing sold billions of dollars in military equipment to Canada. These deals weren't just about planes, they were about influence. Whenever Canada needed to modernize its air force, the Pentagon made sure that Buy American remained the unofficial rule. But this time, Canada seems to be writing its own rule book. When reports emerged that Canada might choose Sweden's Gripen E over the US-built F-35, the reaction in Washington was explosive. Officials in the Pentagon privately called it a betrayal, saying that choosing the Gripen would weaken continental defense cooperation. But behind the scenes, the real issue wasn't defense. It was money and control. Billions of dollars in contracts, maintenance deals, and political leverage were suddenly at risk. The Gripen represents something the Pentagon fears most: independence. It's a fighter designed for nations that want cutting-edge performance without being tied to US military systems. It doesn't rely on American permission for upgrades, spare parts, or mission data. For Canada, that means freedom. For the Pentagon, it means losing a client and a loyal ally in the weapons business. As Canadian defense analysts began praising the Gripen's cost-effectiveness and its ability to operate from remote Arctic bases, Lockheed Martin launched an aggressive lobbying campaign. Suddenly, stories began appearing in North American media, questioning Sweden's reliability and Gripen's lack of stealth. Yet independent experts quickly pointed out that Gripen's advanced electronic warfare systems could detect and jam stealth aircraft, making it far from defenseless. By this point, Washington's frustration had turned into fear. If Canada, one of the closest allies of the United States, could walk away from the F-35 program, what message would that send to other countries? What about Finland, Switzerland, or even Australia? The Pentagon understood the stakes. A Canadian Gripen deal could inspire a chain reaction that would threaten Lockheed Martin's global dominance. Inside Canada, the debate became political. Some leaders argued that buying the F-35 was necessary to maintain strong US relations, while others insisted that Canada's defense policy should reflect Canadian interests, not American pressure. The public sentiment was clear. Most Canadians didn't want to be tied to US politics or expensive weapons systems that cost billions to maintain. Meanwhile, Sweden played its cards carefully. Instead of political pressure, they offered transparency and cooperation. Saab promised Canada a full technology transfer, meaning Canadian engineers could build, maintain, and upgrade the Gripen domestically. They even proposed building an entire Gripen production line inside Canada, creating thousands of local jobs and revitalizing the country's aerospace industry. It was an offer Washington could never match because the US tightly controls all F-35 technology. The Pentagon's anger wasn't just about losing a sale. It was about losing control. For decades, America's strategy has been simple: keep allies dependent on US systems so they can't act independently. But the Gripen breaks that dependency. It's affordable, versatile, and free of political strings. That makes it dangerous, not to global peace, but to the Pentagon's monopoly. Behind closed doors, American diplomats began warning Canadian officials that choosing the Gripen could weaken interoperability between the two nations. But many Canadian defense experts called that bluff. The Gripen, they pointed out, is fully NATO-compatible. It can communicate seamlessly with US systems, fly in joint missions, and use NATO standard weapons. In short, it doesn't need American approval to defend Canada. This new sense of independence terrifies Washington. For the first time in decades, Canada is signaling that it's ready to think and act like a sovereign nation in defense matters. The Pentagon's frustration grew louder when Swedish and Canadian engineers showcased how the Gripen could operate from highways or icy Arctic runways, something the F-35 can't do without specialized infrastructure. The Gripen's ability to take off from short runways and perform quick turnarounds gives Canada a massive strategic advantage in its vast northern territories. Then came the real bombshell. Saab offered Canada full access to the jet's source codes. This means Canada could customize its own weapon systems and software without asking permission from anyone. In contrast, even after paying billions for the F-35, countries like the UK and Japan still need US approval for software updates and weapons integration. That's the level of control Washington wants to keep, and what Gripen threatens to destroy. As news of this independence spread, discussions in NATO corridors began to shift. European nations struggling with US defense restrictions saw Canada's potential Gripen deal as a symbol of freedom. Analysts in Brussels called it the most important defense decision in Canada's modern history. The Pentagon tried to downplay the story, but the frustration was visible. In several defense briefings, US officials hinted that Canada's defense reliability could be questioned if it chose a non-American jet. But to many observers, that sounded more like blackmail than partnership. Canada's media began asking a simple question: why should an ally be punished for making a sovereign decision? Meanwhile, Canadian pilots who had flown the Gripen during testing praised its agility, visibility, and ease of maintenance. They reported that it felt like a fighter built for Canada's geography, not for a US war in the Middle East. Maintenance crews noted that the Gripen's turnaround time between missions was half that of the F-35, and it required fewer ground crew members. This efficiency translates to billions saved over the aircraft's lifetime. By now, the Pentagon knew it was losing the narrative. For decades, it had controlled the story. The myth that only American jets could truly defend Western skies. But Gripen's growing popularity was rewriting that story. Sweden's quiet, cooperative diplomacy stood in stark contrast to Washington's aggressive tactics, and Canada's public was starting to notice. Across Canadian defense forums, online communities, and even parliamentary discussions, one theme kept emerging: independence. The idea that Canada could finally control its own defense future without being a junior partner to the Pentagon was powerful. It resonated with both military experts and ordinary citizens. As this debate raged on, American think tanks began releasing reports warning of the strategic consequences of Canada abandoning the F-35 program. But many of these think tanks were funded by defense contractors. Their arguments, often wrapped in technical language, boiled down to one thing: fear of losing money and influence. For the Pentagon, Canada's Gripen decision wasn't just another lost sale. It was a potential turning point in the global defense market. If one of America's closest allies could reject US hardware and choose a more independent path, others might follow. Washington's defense empire, built over decades through alliances and dependency, was beginning to show cracks. And so, as the tension builds between Ottawa and Washington, one thing is clear. This isn't just about fighter jets. It's about power, sovereignty, and the future of global defense politics. The Pentagon's fury isn't really about Sweden's Gripen. It's about losing control over a friend who has finally decided to think for itself. But this story is far from over, because behind the scenes, powerful forces are now working overtime to ensure that Canada's final decision doesn't break America's grip on its allies. In the next chapter, we'll uncover the secret lobbying efforts, hidden media manipulation, and political pressure that the Pentagon is quietly applying to reverse Canada's move toward the Gripen. What's happening in the corridors of power will shock you, because when billions are at stake, even allies can turn into adversaries.